Good day, everyone. Today on part 221, we'll be discussing statistical data. Statistics deals with the theories and methods of collection, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of numerical data. By this definition, it means statistics as a course is generally about data. So in this session, you will be getting the explanations of data as they will ultimately be employed in statistical analysis designed to test the research hypothesis. This session describes why researchers or investigators examine data and how data may be examined using tables, charts, graphs, and so on. At the end of this study session, we should be able to define data and also discuss the types and classes of data. Statistical data is a collection of quantities, characters, or symbols with related characteristics. It could be it could involve different um, quantities or categories. It could be the number of male students studying BSc Public Administration in Natural State University. It could be the number of inpatients at the Federal Medical Center, Natural State. It could be the number of mortality. It could be number of accidents in a given year. So it could be a whole range of categories. The number is called a data set. Data is a plural word, and a single observation from the data set is called data point or datum. Data is classified into different categories. The two main categories are the quantitative and qualitative data. We won't spend much time discussing that because we've treated that in our previous sessions. So we'll move on to the other type of classification. So this classification is based on the source of data. Data can be classified based on sources from which they are obtained. In this regard, it is categorized into the primary and the secondary data. Primary data is a first-hand information collected by the researcher by himself for a specific purpose. This kind of data has not undergone any form of statistical treatment or any form of manipulations. Primary data in most cases are customized to suit a particular analysis. For example, you want the prices of grains in Kefi market. Instead of going to the to source out those prices from the from National Bureau of Statistics, this researcher goes to the market himself to meet one-on-one with these sellers to get the prices of these grains. That's an example of primary data. Collecting it from the source, directly from the source, for the purpose for which you want to use it for. Primary data are sometimes referred to as raw information. An example of that is the census. As we all know, during the census, your information is not being collected from a particular form that you have filled somewhere. It is a one-on-one interaction. They come to your house and take the numbers and the biodata of everyone. So the census is a very good example of the primary data. Primary data are data collected directly from the field of inquiries by the user themselves. Primary data can be collected in different forms. It could be personal investigation, it could be by observation, it could be um, collection by researchers. In personal investigation, the person collects data by himself or herself by carrying out a personal study. This data is mostly very reliable, and the method is most suitable for small projects, because when you consider the procedures for a large project, it will be exhausting, time consuming, and also cost um, implications will apply. Observation, you could also collect primary data through observation. This involves watching and counting events as they occur. This method is primarily used in traffic census, market survey, etc. For instance, a researcher may wish to know the rate of usage of a public telephone line. He or she may decide to observe and record the number of persons using the line per day or per hour, as the case may be, without necessarily approaching the telephone users. You could take all the information you need by just standing aside and taking notes. Primary data could also be collected by the researchers. Trained researchers are employed to contact the respondents to collect data. This method is occasionally employed by some institutions such as the National Bureau of Statistics, the World Bank, and so on. Primary data could also be collected through questionnaires and interviews. Questionnaires are also used to ask specific questions that suit the study and get responses from the respondents. The collection through interview, the collection of data is done through asking questions over the telephone. This is normally less tedious and time saving, in the sense that you won't have to go there in person. It wouldn't matter whether the person is close or far, as long as you are able to get the information through telephone calls. It saves time, saves cost, and it's very much less tedious. The advantages of primary data: they are always relevant to the subject under study because they are collected primarily for that purpose. It was not a data collected for a different purpose prior to the time of the researcher collecting it and then trying to fish out what might suit his own research questions. From the point of collection, he collects those variables that are useful for the purpose in which he or she wants to use the data for. They are more accurate and extremely reliable. They provide opportunity for the researcher to interact with the study population. That's in the case of meeting um, the population one on one from where he or she is going to collect the data from. Information on other relevant issues can be obtained. If you are there in person to collect this data, there's a possibility and you enjoy the advantage of getting other extra information that might be relevant to the issue on ground, of which you initially didn't factor factor out. So being on field gives you that advantage. The disadvantages of primary data is that it is always costly to collect, especially when it has to be one on one. If it is not through telephone calls or emails, if the method of this primary data collection is the one on one collection, mostly cost is involved, especially when proximity is not put into consideration. Adequate cooperation from the study population. Inadequate cooperation from the study population. There are times you will be on field to collect a particular data about a certain information, and there's every possibility that the people with this information might try to hide the truth of the matter from you based on reasons they they have and will not want to let go. It also wastes a lot of time and energy. So these are the disadvantages of primary data. On the other hand, secondary data are data that have been collected, compiled, and published, and also made available in the form of record by some organizations or persons. These are the kind of data you get from the National Population Commission. The National Population Commission collects a whole range of different data, and let's say you want to work, you want to research in the field of the cases of malaria in Kefi within the period of 10 years. So you easily can get such data from the National Population Commission. Um, that's an example of secondary data, and this data had already been collected and published and compiled and made ready. And don't forget, at the point of collection, they weren't collecting that data for you to carry out a research on malaria. It's a general data that would keep them abreast with the happenings in the country and also help them in making certain government policies and decisions. But you, on the other hand, who is a researcher and needs this particular data, you find it useful. That's the example of a secondary data. In this case, the researcher does not need to go to the field to collect any data. Secondary data are impure in the sense that they have been used by others. So many other people will be collecting the same data for different other uses, depending on the question their research seeks to solve or to answer. The major benefits of secondary data is that it is cheap and easier to obtain. Of course, You're not going there in person to collect from the respondents or observe them yourself. It's already made. You just to walk up to the organization in possession of this data and get that data which is relevant to your study. However, the chances of data error are more likely than in the primary data, and it may not completely meet the need of the research at hand because it was not collected primarily for that purpose. So here we'll be looking at the methods of secondary data collection. Like I earlier mentioned, secondary data can be sourced out from governments, institutions, and bodies concerned with certain kind of data. For example, the official publications from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, Statistical Departments of Governments, Economic Board, government agencies, etc. The Central Bank of Nigeria, National Bureau of Statistics, and the National Population Commission. All of these mentioned, they do publish relevant statistical data. You could also get secondary data from the data published by chambers of commerce and trade association and boards. You could also get it from articles in the researches, from journals, from books and newspapers. It's also possible to get secondary data from the internet. Classification of data based on the form. Sometimes data are classified based on the form of the data at hand and may be classified as cross-sectional data, time series data, panel data. Cross-sectional data. These are data collected from cross-section of subjects. That's a particular population under study at a time. For example, data collected on a cross-section of household on demand for recharge card for a month of August 2013 is an example of cross-sectional data. Time series data. These are data collected on a particular variable or set of variables over a period of time. It could be a period of 10 years, 20 years, and so on. Example, a set of Nigeria's gross domestic product from 1970 to 2012, or the rate of infection of malaria in children within the period of 10 years is also an example of time series data. Panel data. This combines the features of cross-sectional and time series data. They are the type of data collected from the same subject over time. For example, a set of data collected on monthly recharge card expenditure from 100 households in Lagos from January to December 2013 will form a panel data. The main sources of primary data is census and surveys. And These are the sources of secondary data as mentioned above. So continuing with the methods of data collection, discussing under survey, there are three methods of data collection with survey, and these are mail questionnaires, personal interviews, and telephone interviews. Mail questionnaires are impersonal survey method. Here, survey instruments, that's the questionnaire, is mailed to the selected respondents, and the questionnaires are mailed back to the researcher after the respondents must have filled it up. That's through email. The advantages, the cost is low compared to others. Bias error is reduced because respondents are not influenced by the interviewer's characteristics or techniques. They are answering these questions from their comfort zone, so they are most likely more able to give accurate or precise responses, knowing that they have some level of confidentiality. Questionnaires provide a high degree of anonymity for respondents. It provides a degree of anonymity for respondents. This is especially important when sensitive issues are involved. Respondents have time to think about their answers and consult other sources when they are not very sure. Questionnaires provide wide access to geographically dispersed samples at low cost. It wouldn't matter where the person lives. The person could even be abroad. As long as this questionnaire will be sent through emails, geographical location does not really matter, and the cost that comes with lack of proximity is also ruled out. Disadvantages: questionnaires require simple, easily understood questions and instructions. They need to be precise and straight without any confusion. Mail questionnaires do not offer researchers the opportunity to probe for additional information or to clarify answers. Researchers cannot control who fills out the questionnaire. Response rates are low. Most people ignore mailed questionnaires, and then the researcher might not in the end get the number of respondents needed. Personal interview. A personal interview is a face-to-face interpersonal role situation in which an interviewer asks respondents questions to elicit answers pertinent to the research hypothesis. We have the advantages: flexibility. The personal interview allows great flexibility in the questioning process, and the greater the flexibility, the less structure the interview is. Control of the interview situation. An interviewer can ensure that the respondents answer the questions in the appropriate sequence, or that they answer certain questions before they ask subsequent questions. High response rate. The personal interview results in higher response rate than the email questionnaire, because it's easier to ignore an email than to ignore an interviewer seated right in front of you. So the researcher is most likely to get results when using personal interview. Fuller information. An interviewer can collect supplementary information about respondents that can aid the researcher in interpreting results. The disadvantages of personal interview, as we looked at earlier, is higher cost, lack of anonymity, interviewer's bias. Moving to telephone interview. It is also called telephone survey and can be characterized as a semi-personal method of collecting information. In comparison, the telephone is convenient and it produces a very significant cost saving. It has its advantages also. Moderate cost, it saves time, there is high response rate. The disadvantages: respondents may be reluctant to discuss sensitive topics over the phone. The broken off interview. Respondents can terminate the interview before it is completed. Less information in less information. The interviewers cannot provide supplementary information about the respondents' characteristics or environment because they are not there in person. They are only working with what the information they are able to get over the phone. With this, we come to the end of our discussion on statistical data. Thank you.